reduce the pressure that we are giving the developers at the moment, because we are taxing just a small section of the real estate, and the rest are going untaxed, because they are informal. So if we look at our tax policy, our laws and policies, and widen the tax base, regulate the sector, and promote formalization of our businesses, then the taxes will be wider, and maybe we will not be stressed with this whole idea of taxing just a small group of real estate players.
Thank you, Shelley. If you're just joining us, you're watching the second episode of E-Bomba Business. We're coming to you live from Sendaola Hall at Nakawa, the URA headquarters. On sign language, we have Olivia Nachigozi Bulega. She's on the sign language. You can join the conversation on Twitter. You can use hashtag URA Bomba Business 2021. On Twitter Spaces, we're live as well. Judy Rugasira, I come to you with a question about land. Land is, in fact, the first component that you talk about before the conversation about real estate then grows bigger. Land is the first thing that you have to talk about. And it constitutes, of course, the conversation. But at the time, what should I consider before I make a decision to acquire land? And aside from that, how does our land tenure system favor or disfavor land ownership?
Thank you very much, Frank. First of all, the land tenure systems, there are different types of land tenure systems: customary land, freehold land, Milo, and leasehold. So it really depends on what tenure of land you are looking at, or you have, or are interested in buying. Obviously, before you go into any investment, any property development, it is prudent for you to do your due diligence, okay? And there are different phases of acquiring land and moving on to property development. The first phase is the pre-purchase stage, where you identify the land that you want, find out or do your due diligence about where it is, how much it is, what tenure it is, who owns it, ownership and things like that. So before you get involved in any development, it's important to understand the tenure, okay, to understand what the restrictions are on that land, to understand how many years are left on that lease, if it's a leasehold, for example, if there are any easements, okay, if there are any restrictions, height restrictions, is it a wetland, do you need to fulfill certain planning requirements before you actually build on it? So it's critical, and some of these might vary with the different tenures that you have, okay, and others will have less or fewer restrictions on them. So depending on which tenure you're holding as title, you need to make sure that you do your due diligence to ascertain what exactly you can build on that particular plot of land. You need to do your due diligence, you need to get your ownership details sorted out, go to the lands registry, do a search on that property, make sure the ownership is regular, okay? You've heard of different situations where you have 2 or 3 owners on the same title, for example. So we really need, I would advise any developer out there that as you're picking the land that you want to purchase or that you want to develop, you've got to invest time and a bit of money doing your due diligence to ascertain ownership, to ascertain what you can and cannot do on that plot of land.
Okay. The instances when people just instances when people just directly into research. Sorry, I'll repeat the question. There are cases when people just dive into the sector without, taking into note, for example, the tips you're sharing. We want to make this a meeting, a discussion. We want to make it one with user information. A, B, C, D, what am I supposed to do here and there. So as the industry as it is now, the sector, what advice would you give to somebody who has money but they don't know the price of, say, the things they need to construct. They don't know about the tax regime, how it is working, and that kind of thing. Do you have a source of information where you can refer this person? How can they do it?
Okay, I'll reverse the question and tip it on its head. Because we're talking about property development, and I'm going to focus mainly on residential property development, okay? For someone who's starting out, because this advice wouldn't apply to Dr. Aurelia, am I right? Because he's a seasoned developer. But for those who are starting out in development, what is it all about? Basically, property development is adding value to land or buildings, okay? You're creating value, okay, by adding onto either land, by developing it, or a building. You can renovate it, you can convert it. That's a way of adding value. Okay, and at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is to make sure that you create that value and make the development profitable so that eventually you can sell it. So I think the question is, how do we develop properties that are profitable and we're able to sell them without making a loss? Because for a lot of developers out there, they might have to borrow money. And even if you're building on equity with your own cash, you don't want to lose that money. So you really want to build something that is going to be profitable and you're going to get a return out of it. Now, is there any information? There isn't a central place where you can go and collect all this information. But developers need to take time out and study and understand what it is they're getting involved in. And you don't have to be an expert at property development from the outset, because there are people out there who can help you. But you need a basic level of understanding and a basic level of information and knowledge about what it is you want to do. For example, do you want to build townhouses? Do you want to build single unit family dwellings? Do you want to build apartments? I mean, you need to figure this out on your own and by yourself. Where is your land? How big is it? How many units can fit on there? What is your target market? Who are you targeting? Where are you building? Is there demand for the type of property that you're building, where you're building it? And this is information that you can get from your real estate agents. If you go and talk to them, you can get this information from them. They will even show you where the land is. Your LCs can help you identify where these plots of land are. You also need to understand how much money you have to build this property, okay? Because you might wish to have 8 apartments, but you can only afford 4. So you need to figure out how much money is at my disposal and how much money am I able to borrow? Because you don't need to have all the money that you need to develop property. You can go and get financing for it. But you need to remember certain things about financing also. And before we get there, you need to ascertain how much you need to take the development from beginning to end. Okay? You can choose to do it incrementally if you want to, but still, you will need to make sure that you have enough money for the different milestones. If you say that you're going to do from foundation to wall plate and leave it at that, because you want to use the money that you have, then make sure you have enough money to do exactly that. For those who are getting into debt, you need to remember that the banks will not lend you all of the money that you need to build. They will only lend you 70 to 80%? 70%.
70%.
They will lend you 70% of the project cost, not of the final value of the development. So these are things that developers need to be aware of. Okay, so you're getting the cost of your project, you're going to the bank, and they'll tell you we'll probably give you 70% or 80%. But even then, you must have a certain amount of money before you start. You need to have some money, 1, for the down payment, to get that debt, and 2, to do some preliminaries, to do your land searches, to do your due diligence, to pay your architect or your planners for the drawings that they're going to do for you, and things like that. So you need to start off with some money for yourself that you have, okay, before you actually go in and get debt. If you have strong cash flows, strong financial cash flows and revenue streams, that will help de-risk your project, meaning it makes it less risky and therefore more attractive to the bank to lend you this money, okay? And you also need to understand what is the relationship between the sale price, okay, and the income that you're going to get, the income stream that you're going to get from the development when you rent it, or the sale price that you're going to get at the end. So these are all very important things that the developer really needs. And as I said, the information is not in one data bank somewhere that you go, but it's in different places. Talk to your lawyers about doing your due diligence on your title. Talk to your property advisor or your real estate agent about where to buy property, how much to pay for it. Talk to your architect about what you should build there, what can fit. Go to your town planning office, go to your district council, go to your city council and local planner to find out what is permissible for you to build where you want to build it. Okay? What are the requirements? What is allowed? What is not allowed? Again, look at the market that you're building for. There's no point building something that the market doesn't want. Because remember, at the end of the day, we're chasing profit. So if you're building something that the market doesn't want or doesn't need, then you're going to build at a loss, or it's going to take you a lot longer to sell whatever it is that you have built, and it's going to cost you, especially if you're borrowing from the bank. And I could go on and on and on, but
generally where we are now, which is of profit, office space or residential?
it really depends what you're looking for. And I think the mistake that people make when they answer that question is they forget to take into consideration what is it you're looking for. Because somebody who's building offices, a developer that's going into office or commercial construction, might be chasing different objectives to somebody who's going into residential. Okay, for example, the yields are not the same, the returns on both properties are not the same, and they perform differently to one another. Okay, the performance might not be correlated necessarily. So when offices are doing well, residential might not be doing so well, number one. Number two, it depends on how much money you have to invest. How big an office are you building at the end of the day? Because, for example, the return on prime office space right now, we're looking, if you're lucky, between 10, 11 and 12%, roughly. Okay?
Of what? Percentage of what?
That's a yield, the return on your investment.
Okay.
Okay? For residential, anywhere between 7 and 9. Yeah? So it depends what you're looking for. It depends on the cost of your money. Okay? It depends on what your long-term objectives are. It depends on your financial stability as well. Are you borrowing or are you building slowly and incrementally? Do you have the time to wait? People need to give their investments time to perform. If you want a very quick return, tomorrow, in 2-3 years, then real estate is not going to be your thing, whether it's offices or residential. And now is not a time to determine which sector is better than the other, because we're in a very unique time right now. So now is not a time to really be saying, one sector is better than the other, because it's unprecedented. I hate to use that cliche, but it is. We haven't been in times like this before. So I think the prudent thing is to sit down and look at what your objectives are, okay? Why you're going into this investment in the first place, what you can afford to build, okay? Because if you have the luxury of doing both, you can even have a mixed-use development, where you have offices and residential in one building. Okay?
I hear you. Talking about residential, Dr. Sibyl, you've gone into condominiums, and it's a trending thing as we speak. But what's the future of condominiums in Uganda?
I think the condominium is the future. Why? Because land in cities are getting expensive. And I think we have a traditional view of every Ugandan wants to own a house with a garden, and land being expensive in the downtown, so you can only expand outwards. And people have been building houses, and it takes them 2 hours to get to their home every evening and 2 hours to come back. Nothing wrong with that, but it's the amount of time you could actually be using to increase your business. So what the future I see happening is that People will have upcountry homes, farms, but at the same time they'll probably end up having, from middle cost to high-end apartments in town. So they'll probably work in the cities in the weekdays, and Fridays maybe go off country and come back on Monday morning. That's the future of Kampala, I see. And as far as real estate is concerned, we are planning that way. That, condominium is the future. It is affordable. And not only that, it's also secure. When you're living in an apartment block with 100 apartments, you are going to have proper security, you're not exposed on the ground level. So anybody who's even trying to come and rob you will have to think twice. So insecurity is also another issue which is quite high on the suburbs. People coming at night, knocking down your gates, or your, security guard is already sleeping. And that will actually push people into, going to condominium. Now, the other important aspect of condominium is when somebody has worked all his life and has got a plot on a very prime location in the center, downtown. So that comes a time when the children have been married off and they don't need a very big property. So that also could be a transition where you can actually sell your property, or you can go into a joint venture with a reputable company where you said, I provide you land, you put up 10-story apartment block, give me 6 apartments as my share of the land. So, these are the opportunities that will come. Now, the person doing that, it's be easier for them to liquidate the cash they have in the asset they're holding and use that money while they're alive. So you end up into a smaller place between, a couple who doesn't need as much space. You would have good accommodation, secured accommodation, and you have cash to see you throughout your remaining life. So condominium is exciting, is going to be there. And also, traditionally, our mentality in Uganda is to buy land, and over the next 3 or 4 years, as we get money, we keep building slowly. Eventually, we own a house. But by the time you look at the distance from the downtown, it's far.
It takes 4 years to build, 4 to 6.
4 to 5 years.
Because of the income anyway. But I'm seeing condominiums seem to be targeting a particular population, just a small fraction of the population in Uganda.
Now, I think when you say, you're absolutely right when you say it takes 4 to 5 years to build a house. However, in the meantime, you're paying rent. Husband and wife, now it is quite normal in Kampala that a couple would be working, and you probably pay $1 million, 1.5, maybe 2 million shillings rent. It's quite common. Now, the banks have a lot of money, and I think where we are heading is that for the banks to grow in the lending sector, I personally think one of the safest areas would be into mortgages. Now, a lot of the banks are going to go into an area where they will look at a couple and say, if he's paying 2 million shillings rent, how can they come with a product, an apartment, which will make them, the repayment should be equivalent to the amount of the rent you're paying. This way they can grow their credit book. So that is where we're heading now. So you have the middle of the range apartments, and then you have the high end. So for a couple who doesn't want to do a big layout, there are some banks who actually offer those products. And I think you can look into that, where you can go, ask the bank, what have you got on your books and what products you can offer. So whatever rent we are paying, we're able to pay this equivalent. So in about 10, 15 years, you'll have a property of your own, and so, which is a good thing. And we're heading that way. However, my perspective was, how do you invest in real estate? Condominium is one of them. But land, investment in land is in many, many different sectors. The basic one is agriculture, and everybody understands real estate. From the day you are born and you go to school, one of the first things you want in life is to own your own home. So who doesn't know real estate? Okay? So the basic of everything is how one can own his own house.
There is knowing and there is understanding.
Everybody.
That's where you come in now. You understand it more.
Yes. So basically, you are coming from that sense that either you have are born in a village or wherever, and either family has a farmland or something, and from there you also want to build your own home. And it's a basic right of a human being to own a dwelling, as we call, and rightly so. From there, we have other types of investments. You probably, I'll give an example. The manager of my house, who manages the house, he probably owns about 25 rooms. He started, with the salary he was getting from us, he would go and buy a room in Kamocha or places like that, So now that gentleman has acquired about 25 rooms.
That's all residential space.
That is his, from the salary we give him and the bonuses he gets, he saves his money, and he owns now 25 rooms.
He rents them out. As we speak, Doctor, we have a housing deficit of about approximately 2.5 million houses. Judy was talking about borrowing money and investing it in building, houses for rent. But at this point in time, would you advise somebody to take a loan to build a residential space for renting out?
Thank you. I personally believe that your success in real estate will only come if you don't borrow money. Okay? Real estate can be an extremely good business, but it's also extremely, extremely dangerous business. Because if you plan it right, you can make it. If you make a mistake and overstretch yourself in a leveraging or borrowing, it will bring your downfall. My biggest advice to anyone is, first of all, work hard, have one or two jobs or businesses, create your own cash flow, and build your first house without any borrowings. And to grow in the real estate sector is to have a second home, third home, fourth home. Do not borrow till you have minimum 4 property. And then if you want to expand, you can take some loan knowing that you have got rental income from 4 different properties. Now what happens is sometimes go wrong in real estate is that because his friend has got a few properties, he's borrowing money, somebody makes a little money, he said, I can put down payment and let me. Now you don't plan a pandemic, you don't plan the economic downturn. The economy is basically a demand and supply. If you have a good demand for your coffee abroad, you'll sell, you get very good prices, the country will get revenue, and the revenue will then be spent in the country. If the price of coffee goes down, you'll see the rest of the industries attached to it will also go down. So it's basically demand and supply, not only in Uganda, but outside Uganda. Because we are basically an agro-based an economy. Now the other thing is, what sort of kicks off the demand is consuming in a consumer's economy. When it's a consumer's economy, everything else will grow. And in a recession or downtown, the economy contracts. So when the consumers stop consuming, your taxation goes down, everything goes down with it. And one of the biggest sectors to be hit is real estate. So that's why my view is that first few properties that you accumulate or want to accumulate, avoid borrowing. It may take time, nothing happens. My business has been built over from 1986. So it's about 35, 36 years now. And we like this thing to happen overnight. And by borrowing, you can make it, but you can also go down very fast. So in first few properties, my advice is please avoid borrowing. Now, when there's a couple who are earning money and they're paying rent, and you have a scheme from the bank which says that your repayment is equivalent to the rent you're paying, that's okay. Because either way you're going to pay the rent. So you might as well get a scheme where you pay an installment equivalent to the rent you're paying. And you're actually accumulating wealth. And your rent is not vested.
So mortgage is the way to go.
So mortgage, yeah, those things are available now, and they're going to grow. Because if you look, apart from the corporates, the banks will not lend you money. Which bank in their right mind will lend you money on real estate today? Right?
Yeah.
That's a reality. However, one of the safest ways for the bank to lend is to pay a young upcoming couple or partners enough lending to match with their rental income or the rent they're paying. It's a safe bet.
All right. Irene, I come to you, the taxman and real estate. Currently, what are the policies, the tax policies that govern the real estate sector? You could take us through some of them.
Thank you, Frank. Yes, as explained by the fellow panelists, real estate and rental business, leasing and letting is taxable. And it's one way of contributing to our gross domestic product, but also the tax to that gross domestic product. As a nation, we go through taxes which are imposed on income earned, and if real estate is earning income, if letting is giving you income, it is taxable under the Income Tax Act on any income tax under Section 5 of the Income Tax Act. But also, there are many other taxes along with that sector. We have capital gains tax under income tax again. That is if you sell this asset, or it could be a property, it could be land that you've developed, as long as it's an item that you're using in your business, it's now sold as an asset. And once you sell it, we look at the price of sale, we compare it with the price at which you bought it, that is the cost incurred, and then any difference. It could be a capital loss, it could be a capital gain. The beauty with income tax, we only tax you when you have a profit and not when you have nothing as a gain. So we have income tax under income tax. I've mentioned we have the Income Tax Act, which is income tax on rent or rental income. We have capital gains, but also we have corporation tax if these assets are managed as corporates. If you've incorporated and these assets or these things that you've invested in terms of real estate, the land, the buildings, the whatever nature, the condominiums we're talking about, as long as they're incorporated and owned as a company, then corporation tax applies. But also we have withholding tax. And I think that is one of the areas where I think in the sector we have either, maybe we do not know about it, but I noticed that there's a lot of gap in there. On the sale of this asset, you are required to actually withhold 6%. You the seller. When the person is buying from you, you are required to withhold 6%. And that is also another tax applicable in the sector. The beauty with this withholding tax is that you can recover it when it comes to the end of the financial year, you're accounting for your income tax. This is advanced tax. So it's not like an additional tax. It's advanced tax. At the end of the financial year, you come up with your corporation tax liability less by what was withheld from you at that point of purchasing or selling the land. The other area is VAT. Now, VAT is another tax that, sometimes is not very well understood. But VAT in the rental sector or real estate is imposed on commercial properties and not on residential properties. So if you have a property which you were residing in, you leave it, possibly take the advice and go to a rural area, and you let it out. Now, the nature of that service, if it's used for residential, you will not charge VAT. If you're using it for commercial, now the person letting it out is a company and it's carrying out business, then VAT comes in. So at that point in time, you register for VAT, and under VAT, you make monthly returns of the 18% of what you've charged, less any other expenses where you have actually incurred input tax or VAT for that matter. The other area of taxation, apart from VAT, income tax, and the rental and corporation tax, we also have stamp duty. Now, each time you're going to sell your property or each time you make an agreement, the law requires us to pay stamp duty on that agreement. And that is some part that we normally miss out. Stamp duty authenticates this agreement. In case you get into a dispute of sorts, what shows that this agreement is authentic is the stamp duty that you pay. And it's another area that is taxable under real estate sector. Those are the taxes that are managed under Uganda Revenue Authority. But there's also property tax. Now, property tax is on the ownership, and it includes ground rent and rates. Now, this is managed under the local government authority, and it is managed under that act. However, how does this work? It ranges between 0 to 12% depending on the area and depending on the rates applicable. So these are rates that are administered by the local authorities, and they are not based on how much income you earned or how much rent you're receiving, but that's the fact that you own this property and in a particular area. It is like a license of whether you are actually making business or not. This is a rate that is applicable to that property. Yes.
Property tax, rental income tax. I have had thoughts coming in from different people that this is like double taxation. URA comes, and then the local authority comes. How are you dealing with that? How are you helping people understand that actually the two taxes are different?
Very good question. Very good question. Because at the end of the day, as government, we're one body. Doesn't matter who regulates what. The taxes managed under Uganda Revenue Authority, that is the rental tax or capital gains tax, is tax on income earned. If you have a property and this property has no occupant, your return that year will show nil. And as long as there's no income earned, there's no tax levied in that area. I'll give you an example. We have corporation tax. If you're a company, if you have, I think here Judy can bear me witness, when you're managing a property, you will pay tax depending on the income or the occupancy that you have earned. So this income, less it by the expenses that you're having, the balance is what is taxed.
It's taxable.
If it's an individual, you have your 2, 3, rentals, one unit or two, depending on the size. That income, if they are not occupied, you did not earn any income, we actually do not charge you tax. So tax is basically on income earned on the property. Now, the property rates on the other side is the fact that you own this piece of asset or land or building or property in a particular area. So that right to be in that place is what you pay for. It's like, if I can compare it to KCCA license, if I am going to operate a a lockup or something in Kampala, I'll pay in advance, regardless of whether I'm going to make money or not money. But what gives me a right to stay there is what I pay for. And in the tax matters, that rate is actually an allowable expense, because we know it's something you incur in the cost of doing your business. So those are the two things. You cannot expense rental tax, but you can expense property tax or ground rate that you've paid, or any other rates that you have used to actually earn the income that you're going to declare at the end of the year. That's the difference.
All right, talking about VAT, I've heard stories from Kampala especially. Landlords collect VAT from, there is a rental fee, then on top of that, the VAT. But again, people do not understand how this element of VAT comes in when I am paying rental fees. I am operating a boutique somewhere, why should I pay VAT? That question is there as well. And if a landlord takes VAT from me and I am VAT compliant, what happens there? Do you pay back the money? What happens?
Thank you. Sorry. Yes, VAT. VAT is value-added tax. In the explanation, we are taken through, you start with the land, you add value, you make it something else. Land in its own way may not necessarily give you a service. But when you add value to it, and you're now going to put it to a market, you're going to put it somewhere to allow it to be used, that's the value you have added. Now, if a landlord has hit the threshold, especially when it's commercial, at that point in time, as a boutique, definitely that's commercial. So at that point, if the landlord is registered for VAT, the value he's giving you of putting you in this or allowing you this space to do your business, that value is charged VAT. For example, he may say so much rates in terms of square meters, or others just the space. This one room is so much. Others will go square meter. Others will go. Well, it depends on how the rates are determined. That value is what the property owner is telling you. Now, the service is 18% on top of that value that has been quoted. So how does it play out to you as the user? If you're a boutique and you're registered for VAT, this invoice or this receipt that is given to you with VAT, you are allowed an input tax credit when you file your returns at the end of the day. But what I will tell you about VAT is it's a consumption tax. So if you're a boutique not registered for tax, then you're the consumer at that point in time. Unless you file your returns, register for income for VAT, and then you now have an opportunity to ask for the credit. The challenges I know in that sector are sometimes these agreements are not well signed, or sometimes it's a gentleman's agreement. Oh, the space is so much. How much? Cash changes hands, and there's nothing to record. So that flow, now the person spending may not benefit because there's no document to show that actually you have incurred this expense. So documentation in that area is very, very key. How do you even demand for your receipt? And besides, is it the right rent that you paid? Again, what was the evidence of payment? Because we're in a cash economy, so we would not know if it simply changes hands and there's no documentation anywhere. You may suffer silently as the consumer, as the runner of this boutique, as the runner of this business, because you don't have any document that supports your expense.
I hear you. There was a decline, I mentioned it earlier, in collection. Construction, for example, declined by about 15%, 15.9%, and real estate declined by about 4.6%. And that's within this pandemic. Call it 2 years, approximately 2 years. And I am wondering, is there any incentive URA is giving to real estate developers, or you let it be? If you earn, you pay. Zero. Doctor is saying zero.
Definitely not zero. Because we have services to give to our nation. We have all these things that we need to support. And indeed, we appreciate our clients for supporting us. Good question is, how do we support them back? If you look at the current law as it is, 2021, 1st July, okay? Our predictions are that it's actually going to give a lower rental return in terms of tax. Because the law has changed in that, if I can just give a brief of that, we started from, rental tax has been here all the time. Individuals have different rates, the corporates have different rates. Now for individuals it was 20%, that's the cap for your expenses. Whether you spend so much, we don't allow you just 20%. And then the balance is where we apply the threshold and then 20% of the tax. Now for corporates, it was at large, 30%, but then we allow all the expenses. Now this changed in 2014. 2014, I think thanks to Shadi and the team, mortgages were allowed. Because I think the 20% wasn't enough in case somebody borrowed money to put that asset together. So the mortgage was allowed on top of the 20% to give some relief to the real estate investor, ensure that at least if other expenses are capped, at least your interest is catered for. Now, come to 2021, the current one in place, it has actually been leveled now. The corporate companies have a cap of 75%. It's no longer as it is. Then 30% on the balance, including the mortgage or interest on mortgage. The individuals, the same thing. Whereas the rate has gone from 20% to 30%, again, there is a cap for the expenses that has been now considered. So it's level ground for both individual and the company. What that does, it definitely affects us in terms of URA, the rental tax that we shall receive. But I think that's an opportunity on the other side that now somebody knows that at least my expenses are catered for and the tax burden will be quite less. But of course, as we review, as the sector goes, we don't know what the future has. And of course, we've seen so many things changing. Yes, it has gone down in terms of the business in the central business district, but we see more growing out. Now, once it grows out, that means us as Uganda Revenue Authority, we need to be able to understand these new products that are coming in, the condominium the condominium sector that is coming in. We are looking at guys who are doing both office and residential, and then out there, because there's a proposal of rates in the different areas. But at the end of the day, what is happening in the sector, we as URA need to move to appreciate what's happening in the sector, and then the tax possibly also changes to fit and address the sector to ensure that we balance both the investor that is putting in money, but also to not upset or offset the other side that actually is supposed to fund our government budget.
All right, thank you. When we return in the second part, I will ask on behalf of a person who wants to invest in real estate, who lives in, let's say, Mukono, Kayunga, that side. These people want to understand, when do you start collecting rental income tax? I build a house, a residential space for renting out. Do you start immediately when tenants get in? When do you start? Or you give me some leeway, you know, of a year or two? I don't know. You will explain that to the viewers. If you are joining us right now, you're watching the second episode of E-Bombaya Business. We're coming to you live from the URA headquarters in Nakawa. We are in Sendaula Hall. On Twitter, we are live on Twitter Spaces, as well as URA TV on YouTube and Facebook. There are also our media partners, that is BBS and Baba Television. You can catch the show there as well. Be sure to send in your thoughts, your questions. The panelists here will be able to respond to some of them if time allows. Let's take a short break. We'll be back.
Enoni Baba TV obusoga bulayire.
My home, I smile when I think of you, Uganda. My home. My home, I dance when I look at you, Uganda. My home, oh my my Uganda.
I know with you I'll always stay forever. I know, because I feel that we belong together. My home, under the sun so bright, under the moon at night, on my heart, mommy, oh my Uganda.
At MTN, we look forward to starting another exciting journey together to grow our home, Uganda.
Tukwaniliza kupal Andilisa Secondary School Kulambiro Mtinda tulina abasomesa abatendeke Science Laboratory, Computer Laboratory. Abaana tubalisha bulungi ebibiina abaana bwe basomera birungi ino okukoota ebisulo ebiri ku mutindo gw'ensi yona embeera esobozesa omwana okusoma obulungi ebyemisaano okwewandiisa kuli kujja maiso. Admission form osobola okudifuna ku Phone Point Shop okulingiriza Mayfair okumala ebisingawo kuba ku 706 85 5 95 obazo 784 789 25 95. Pearl and Lisa Secondary School.
Getting GoTV was the best decision James has ever made. Finding a good place to watch football was never easy, but it was costly until James discovered something big. Now he can finally enjoy the benefits of homegrown advantage with a decoder and 1 month of GoTV value. For just 25,000 shillings, enjoy the world's biggest leagues and cap competitions. GoTV Uganda, love it.
Nze kati wendi nemanyiza ekigambo kino kibayita mask kasooka kunkalubirira kali kazibu nali manyidde okunaaba mu ngalo nga nvudde mu kiyigo nisi kunaaba buli ddakiika 3 ova mu dduuka aye n'omulala n'akuddamu bikooya naye asiika obulamu tassa mukono nkwegayiridde tassa obulamu bwo tokkiriza kufa ng'olaba.
Weewala okukwatibwa akawuka ka COVID-19 ng'okola bino wammanga naaba mu ngalo ne sabbuuni. Yambala masiki yo, teekawo akabanga wakati wo n'abakuliraanye. Weewala omujjuzo, sigala ewaka. Weewala okukwata mu ngalo wamu n'okwegwa mu bifuba. Genda bakugeme.
Ntuto ogusooka kati ntwala gwakubi.
Yes,
bw'olaba nsituddeko ng'obikka empewo teenoona langi. Bikka empewo enoona langi, bikka empewo gy'eva, empewo eyonoona langi, bannange birangi nabyo.
Gwe waguze byaki?
Ebiriyo katale.
Langi ntuufu gy'eri. Muve ku birangi. Tukozesa Hidaka. Mujembalage.
Kankwanjulire Hidaka Paint etagenda kujuza wadde okweraliikiriza. Bakoledde langi mbika eby'enjawulo omuli weather guard, silk vinyl, undercoat, texture paste, multi-motion ne primer. Balina langi esiigibwa wabweru w'ekizimbe ne munda.
Hidaka Paint with love.
Nga tugoberera ensoma ey'amasomero aga secondary ago wansi omuko gwe 12 the Directorate of Industrial Training yaweebwa olukusa olw'okutaawa omutendera ku masomo 8 aga pre-vocational era ng'omusomi ayikirizibwa okulondako omulimu mulala gwe yeesiimiire wansi w'enkola ya agriculture, art and design, performing art, physical education, technology and design, nutrition ni technology, ICT ni entrepreneurship era ng'omusomi ayida kwetegerezebwa akakasibwe ne Directorate of Industrial Training DIT